This happened in the fall of 2025, and to this day, it remains the most deeply unsettling experience of my entire life. I am writing this because the silence in my room tonight feels just a little bit too heavy, and I need to get it out of my chest. I had spent a few days in Austin, Texas, visiting some old friends from college. I live in southern Louisiana, which means the drive back is roughly an 8-hour stretch along monotonous highways flanked by dense pines and dark swamps. On my final morning in Austin, as I was packing my bags, an old high school buddy named Tom replied to one of my Instagram stories. We had lost touch over the years, only maintaining that shallow modern connection of liking each other's posts every few months. He noticed I was in town and mentioned that he had recently moved into a small house about an hour outside Austin, a route that was conveniently on my way home. He invited me to drop by for a quick drink to catch up, thinking it would be a pleasant detour to stretch my legs. I agreed and typed his address into my GPS. The drive took me off the main interstate and onto narrow, winding back roads lined with overgrown cedar trees and decaying timber fences. By the time I pulled up to Tom's property, the sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the yard. His house sat isolated at the end of an unpaved dirt path. It was an aged, 2-story wooden structure built sometime in the late 70s, featuring a wraparound porch with peeling white paint. As I stepped onto the porch, the floorboards groaned violently beneath my boots. Tom opened the door before I could even knock. He had aged, his hair thinning, but he greeted me with a warm, bear hug-style embrace. Yet, as I stepped over the threshold, a strange odor hit my nostrils, a dense, suffocating mixture of damp earth, dried lavender, and something faintly sour, like spoiled meat, hidden deep behind drywall. The interior was stuck in a bygone era. Dark oak paneling covered the walls, and the velvet furniture smelled of dust and damp wool. Every single step across the hallway produced a low, weeping sound from the floorboards. Tom poured us 2 glasses of neat bourbon, and we sat in the living room as twilight fully gave way to pitch-black night. 1 drink seamlessly turned into 3, then 4. The alcohol surged warm through my veins, but it didn't completely wash away the creeping sensation of being watched that had plagued me since I entered the house. Every time the wind blew outside, the old window panes rattled violently. By 9:30 p.m., I was far too intoxicated to drive 8 hours back to Louisiana. Tom chuckled, noticing my slurred speech, and made the offer I knew was coming. He insisted I stay the night. When I offered to crash on the worn-out couch, he waved his hand dismissively and said he had a fully furnished spare bedroom at the end of the hall. He led me down a narrow corridor where the air grew noticeably colder with every step. The ambient temperature dropped so suddenly that I could see faint wisps of my own breath in the dim light. Tom opened the door to the spare room, flipped a wall switch, but the ceiling light only flickered weakly before dying completely. Bulbs burnt out, Tom muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Sorry, man. There's enough light coming from the hallway, though. I was too exhausted and tipsy to care. The room contained only a high-framed vintage bed, a small bedside table, and a deep, shadow-drenched closet tucked away in the far corner. The door of the closet hung slightly open. Tom wished me a good night and pulled the bedroom door almost shut, leaving only a sliver of hallway light cutting across the carpet. I kicked off my boots, collapsed onto the heavy mattress, and buried my face in the pillow. The sheets felt oddly damp and freezing cold against my skin. Sometime around 2:45 a.m., I jolted awake. My mouth was parched, my head pounded with a dull migraine, and the room was shrouded in total darkness. The hallway light had been turned off. The only illumination came from a sliver of pale, sickly moonlight filtering through the dusty window blinds. I rolled onto my back, rubbing my eyes, and that was when my gaze drifted toward the far corner of the room. Hanging directly on the frame of the open closet door was a tall, dark figure. At first, my alcohol-addled brain tried to rationalize it as a long, heavy trench coat slung over a coat hanger. But as my eyes adjusted to the gloom, a cold spike of adrenaline pierced through my heart. The silhouette was far too wide at the top. It possessed broad, muscular shoulders that sloped unnaturally down into thick, dangling arms. It had no distinct face, but where the head should have been, the shadow tapered into a thick, elongated neck that leaned forward at a bizarre, unnatural angle. It was not hanging from a hook. It was standing vertically against the wood. My breath caught in my throat. I froze completely under the blankets, my pulse hammering in my ears like a war drum. I tried to tell myself I was hallucinating from the whiskey. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 10, and reopened them, hoping the figure would disappear. It had not disappeared. In fact, it appeared to have shifted a few inches closer to the foot of my bed. I pulled the thin blanket up to my chin, shivering uncontrollably from a sudden bone-chilling cold that filled the room. A faint scent of wet rot and copper wafted from the corner. I stared at the silhouette for what felt like an eternity, terrified that if I blinked, it would move. Eventually, sheer mental exhaustion overwhelmed my panic, and my body forced itself into a fitful, nightmare-ridden sleep. When I opened my eyes again, faint gray light was peeking through the blinds. Dawn had arrived. I sat up abruptly, my heart instantly racing back to panic mode. I looked toward the closet door. The dark figure was gone. The closet door was swung wide open now, revealing an empty, dark void inside. Scrambling out of bed, I burst into the hallway and sprinted to Tom's bedroom. I slammed his door open and shook his shoulders violently. Tom gasped, waking up thoroughly disoriented.
Tom, wake up!
I yelled, my voice cracking with absolute terror. There was someone in my room last night, hanging on the closet door. Tom blinked heavily, trying to process my words. What are you talking about? What coat? The black trench coat, or whatever the hell it was. It was standing right by the closet. Tom sat up, his face hardening with confusion. Man, I don't own a trench coat, and there isn't even a hanger or a hook in that spare room. Nobody uses that room. I demanded he come see for himself. We walked back down the hallway, the floorboards groaning beneath our feet. I pointed frantically to the closet door. It was right there, Tom. I swear to God it had broad shoulders, and it was leaning over the bed. Tom walked over to the closet, examined the bare door frame, and peered inside the empty closet. There were no clothes, no coat hangers, nothing except dusty floorboards and a rusty metal hook high up on the wall that was far too small to hold any heavy garment. Tom turned around, his face pale, but he tried to play it off with a nervous laugh. You were trashed last night, man. You had a sleep paralysis episode, or a night terror. I know what I saw. I screamed, shaking my head violently. We decided to search the entire house just to be safe. We checked every bedroom, the basement, the attic hatch, and all the outer doors. Every door and window was locked tight from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry, no strange footprints, and no black coat anywhere in the house. Unable to handle the suffocating dread lingering in the air, I packed my bags immediately. Tom didn't push me to stay. As I backed my car down his dirt driveway, I looked back through my rearview mirror at the second-story window of the spare bedroom. Standing behind the glass, partially obscured by the dirty blinds, was a tall, broad-shouldered shadow, silently watching my car pull away into the morning fog. I never went back to Tom's house. 6 months ago, I tried calling his number, but the line had been disconnected. When I checked property records online, I discovered the house had been completely abandoned shortly after my visit. To this day, I don't know if Tom was lying to me or if whatever was hanging in that dark corner wasn't an intruder at all, but something that had been living in that house long before Tom ever moved in.